Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want. Hello and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm Alexandra Paul, and I'm here with my co-host, Dotsie Bausch. Hi, Dotsie.
Hi, it's good to see you on the computer screen, but I miss you in person.
Yeah, me too. We'll be back together in person soon. But listen, you know what? We've done over 120 episodes. And as you know, one of the great things about having a podcast is that we interview such interesting people. And I, for one, I don't know about to you, I'm sure it's the same for you, Dotsie, but we learn a lot, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, and you're really good at the application of all of the things that we learn. I just like to think about it. I don't do as much as I should, but you've tried so many tips out from all of our guests.
I wanted to share with our audience some things I have learned from our guests over the episodes in case they wanted to check out some of our older episodes. So the first one is, Dotsie, as you know, I now take cold showers because of our episode 93 with Dr. Hanna Kaliova. It's called Keto and Cold Theory. And she explained how cold showers will rev up your metabolism by giving you more brown fat. And I know that kind of sounds weird to have more brown fat, but as we learned, it's different from white fat, the normal fat, and it's supposed to be good for you. So I take a cold shower most days, not when it's cold out, but after I've had a workout, and if I feel warm, I'll turn on the cold shower and take it cold. And I don't know if it's working, but let me tell you, I feel energized.
Is that the kind of fat? I can't remember the definition and explanation of brown fat. It's not the kind of fat that clogs your arteries.
Right. And it's a kind of fat that's found in the shoulders. And she said very little. It's not like I'm going to get a hump on my back. It's maybe an ounce or two or something, very, very little, but it helps with the metabolism and it's supposed to be good the more brown fat you have. So but before my shower, I do something that we learned from our guest, Karen Calabrese, who was the raw vegan, who's 74 years old from episode 122. She mentioned how she uses a dry brush on her skin daily, and my calves, they got so dry and kind of like, I hate to say it, but old lady looking. I mean, they looked really. So when I heard she used a dry brush, I thought, wow, okay, now she's 74, but she doesn't look 74. So I'm going to try it. And it reminded me, because in the 80s, I did do it. And basically it's just taking a brush and before your shower and brushing yourself all over. And it's very invigorating, like a cold shower. And then go in the shower and wash it off, wash all that dead skin off. And I have to say, it's made a huge difference.
That one I did implement. I went to for everybody to know, there's a duo pack on Amazon of dry brushes. One is coarser and one is softer, because you actually need something a little softer for like your neck and your arms, a bit more sensitive than your legs and your back, right? So I'll have Kirk do the coarser one on my back and do my legs. But I've noticed a big difference too, so much so that my parents have been visiting this past week. We've ordered my mom her dry brush duo, and she's going to do that. And I've actually been doing it before bed. So I don't know if there's like sloughed off old dead skin all on my carpet now next to bed, but it's just something, I just keep it by my bedside table. It's easy to do. And you just brush towards the heart. And I will say that one I implemented, and I've noticed a big difference in my skin. all over my body.
Yeah. Yeah. So folks, if you want to listen, Karen's very interesting anyways, a raw vegan. So episode 122. Dotsie, do you remember episode 74 with Dr. Will Bolshevitz? And he talked about the microbiome.
Dr. B.
Yeah. That was a very popular episode because everyone's interested in the microbiome. But the thing that I learned from him that I implement is how important variety is. He said that the single most important thing for the health of our microbiome is to eat a varied diet. So I really make an effort to eat a little bit of different things. Like that's my excuse for delving into Ian's salads. Like, can I have that for my microbiome? He'll go, okay. So
because he's just ever so slightly messing with your microbiome when you guys kiss, because every once in a while out of the house he has an animal here and there. So it's like
that was from that was like our second episode.
Dr. Angie Sudoku.
Yeah. I'm happy to say that Ian is probably 99% vegan now. I would say that's maybe 98. It's just really so I can kiss him with less worry.
Right.
So if you want to help heal your microbiome, though, we talked to Dr. Brick Goldner. Do you remember she talked about autoimmune diseases? And that was show 66. And what I do from her is what she does every day, which is the green shake, which she piles in a lot of spinach and then some fruit in a blender and then blends it up and drinks it throughout the day. I actually use kale because I don't want to get the oxalates from spinach. So I use kale and it tastes really healthy. It tastes like grass. It doesn't taste great. I don't add fruit to it. I just drink plain, but
you just blend up kale and nothing else?
Nothing else. Yeah. Just
so kale. With water or?
Yeah, just with water. I'll add some flax seeds sometimes.
Okay.
And it just, I really feel like I'm getting a lot of health in that one drink.
So then the point would be, instead of eating the kale, you're able to get so much more in because you're drinking it. So how many kale leaves and what kind of kale do you use?
I use the dinosaur kale and I do an entire bunch.
Okay.
Yeah, which is hard to eat raw, so, you get the most nutrients from kale when it's raw.
Definitely.
And chewed really well, as we learned from Joel Kahn. If it's chewed really well, then it'll give you more nutrients. And last but not least, because I could talk about all the stuff I've learned so much, so we'll do this chat again. But potatoes. Chef AJ talked to us both about potatoes and how people shouldn't be afraid of complex carbohydrates and starches. And sure enough, we always, and Ian now is eating so many potatoes.
I saw a post by Dr. Danielle Bellardo, who's going to come on the show soon. And it was just, carbohydrates are not bad for you. Carbohydrates are not bad for you. It just said it like 100 times over in one square. They're actually a macronutrient that you would die without. Like, they're so plentiful and so healthy and so many phytochemicals and phytonutrients. And there's about 1 million kind of potatoes. That's this cool thing, right? But I'm like you, and putting them in the air fryer is just incredible because you really don't have to use any oil, or you can use a teeny tiny bit, but they get super crispy on the outside and real soft on the inside. I do them at like 400 for about 10 minutes in the air fryer. And it's like having a French fry, but with no oil or no deep frying.
That's
yummy.
Great. Yeah. Thank you,
Yummy.
Chef AJ. I can't remember what episode that is, but folks, it's probably about episode 60, maybe
like that.
50.
Yeah.
So check that one out. She's a dynamo. So anyway, thanks to all our guests and all of you listeners. We now have today 2 more guests that are I'm sure I'm gonna end up telling you in a few weeks what I've implemented from what they've told us, because they're so full of and fantastic information. Doctors Ayesha and Dean Sherzai are a plant-based power couple. Both neurologists. They met in Afghanistan while Dean was on assignment with HHS and Ayesha was working for Doctors Without Borders. Both deeply affected by the loss of their grandparents to Alzheimer's, they felt passionate about changing the world for good. Together, they developed the unprecedented Alzheimer's prevention program at Loma Linda University after leaving their jobs at UC San Diego. They are pioneers in the preventative care movement for brain health, and we are honored to have them on the show. Welcome to the podcast, Ayesha and Dean.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for the kind introduction, and Dotsie for being connected with you guys. We're very excited to be here.
You know, we wanted to start off with how you met and talk a little bit about your time in Afghanistan, because it was really, it sounds like it was huge for what you're doing now, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, we met in 2003
Yes.
in a party. I was there initially with HHS and World Bank, and then I was hired by the president as the Deputy Minister of Health to create the healthcare system. And in a party we met. Ayesha, my story is that she came, sat next to me, but for some reason her memory seems to be different. We started talking, and our first conversation was about our grandparents. Her grandfather was I knew about her grandfather and she knew about mine. Her grandfather was a Columbia trained, Hopkins trained surgeon who went back and created the healthcare system, and then prime minister of the country, and around women's empowerment, build a whole infrastructure. And my grandfather was the youngest Secretary of Education, and again, women's empowerment, and no good deed goes unpunished. And they were both kicked out because of the same reason. So my family came here very early to the United States. We went back, our life has been about service throughout the world, but as it happened, we met in Afghanistan, and the conversation was about how these amazing human beings, which were just brilliant, lost bits of themselves to this horrible disease, which is Alzheimer's. And we saw the decay over time. And the story was that when my family are mostly doctors in Virginia and East Coast, and we gather in this farm that we had for hunting at the time. And thank goodness, as I say, surgeons make terrible hunters. The animals were safe. And we gathered around him, and one time this brilliant man forgot how to move a chess piece. And Ayesha had a similar story, and we both cried, and that was the beginning. We dated a few times, and a year later we were married.
Yeah.
And you guys, when we started out, you said you guys went vegan together in the middle of Afghanistan. Just in one day, one period of time, just boom. What was the impetus for that? How did that happen?
Yeah. So we initially went vegetarian, but the concept was so foreign. We were, like I said, I grew up in a hunting family, terrible hunters, but the hunters nonetheless, the mentality, and ate meat. You know, I was on a protein diet and all kinds of stuff. But we were both from the background of challenging the status quo, thinking about things when they bothered you. And when I was promoted to become deputy minister, the tradition is to sacrifice an animal. And in Pittsburgh, where I grew up, you don't sacrifice, you just go to Giant Eagle to buy your meat. When you're there and you're seeing two lambs next to each other, and then one of them is sacrificed and the other one tries to move it, if it doesn't make you think, there's something wrong with your frontal lobe. And that
what do you mean the other one tries to move it?
There were two of them, and one
right.
of them was sacrificed, and the other one actually started nuzzling, pushing the other one to make it stand up again, to move.
Oh.
And that had such an impact on both of us that it made us think. And we started reading all the thought leaders, and this person that was a few weeks earlier eating meat all the time, and I was on a protein diet. We decided that there's no way that this could be for thinking, for us in 21st century back then, 21st century to still be doing this. So, and Ayesha actually brought up the idea. And
yeah, so it was for ethical reasons, essentially. And we knew of the impact of animal farming on the environment and on health, but it was something that's, it almost sounds like a background noise, like white noise. You really don't think about it too much.
It's almost like too esoteric.
Right. And there has to, a trauma has to happen to you. Something has to hit you really hard for you to start thinking about it. So the thought and the action actually began there while we were there.
Wow.
And then you did more research and discovered that that there was actually a health benefit to eating a plant-based diet.
When we decided to get back to neurology, I was a medical student then, we chose the best institution, which was at that time UC San Diego with Dr. Leonthal. Dean worked with him as his last fellow. And I worked in a neuroimaging facility there and did research on Alzheimer's disease. And coming from that kind of a rich public health background into a very specific neurology field, we realized that it was a very, very dark place because we didn't have any treatment for Alzheimer's disease. Everyone who came in the clinic, we would say, well, you have dementia. There's really nothing we can do about it. There's no treatment. There's no medicine. And yeah, just kind of think about your quality of life. And so when you're in that field, you kind of become depressed when you see that you're not really making a difference. And so we started looking around. Again, our public health background pushed us to look at epidemiology. And we met with a couple of really crucial mentors, Dr. Elizabeth Barrett Connor. She was actually the principal investigator of this huge study that looked at diet and lifestyle and cardiovascular health. And lo and behold, that connected us to the Adventist Health Study. And we found out that Loma Linda was just, a few miles away. Well, not few, but about 60 miles away. And so Dean made a cold call to the president of the university and said, I want to come and start a program there. And I sought to get into a residency program for preventive medicine and neurology. And so that's how our field began. The term preventive neurology was coined by us. And so we've been doing research on looking at prevention of stroke, prevention of Alzheimer's disease, and we have a clinic, the Alzheimer's prevention program, and all our efforts are essentially focused on how do we prevent diseases of the brain with lifestyle, and the results have been just incredible.
Preventative neurology, what a concept.
We're talking about 87 billion neurons, 1 quadrillion potential connections. Theoretically speaking, mathematically speaking, up to 400 miles of vasculature. We're talking about vascular organs like heart and the reproductive organs. The brain is even exponentially more vascular. We're talking about a machine that's 3 pounds, 2% of body's weight, and consumes 25% of your body's energy and does some of its best work at night. So it's a hyper-driven machine. My son is next to us on a computer and you can hear the fan. You need a cooling system for a regular little Mac computer or, whatever computer. The brain is exponentially more powerful. In fact, this is not a hyperbolic to say it is more powerful and in its current state than any supercomputer of the day. Yet the cooling system, the energy system is bewilderingly efficient, but it gets overwhelmed. Not just because of its vascular. We're talking about 4 mechanisms. We're talking about insulin and glucose dysregulation. We're talking about lipid and fat dysregulation, which is what you talk about. We talk about oxidative damage with fats. We're talking about inflammation, which is the common denominator pathway. All these pathways overwhelm this amazing brain, which was not expected to live past 30. You were expected to run away from tigers, bears, whatever, in some cases, smaller organisms, in my case, rabbits, and then reproduce and die. And that's literally the objective was that sequence. And anything beyond that is magical thinking. Yet now we want to live to our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We're in Loma Linda, the longest living, healthiest living people. And believe me, I want to live even past that. And if anybody who says they don't, they're lying to themselves. We do. That's why this entire world of industry of health, and we're talking about longevity and vitality. But this brain is overwhelmed. But here's the secret. This is an incredibly important secret. This overwhelmed brain also has an incredible capacity to rejuvenate, to continually grow into your old age because of what I just described, which is the 87 billion neurons, the redundancy, the vasculature, and the connectivity. It can make connections at a 15,000 times rate well into your 80s, 90s, and beyond. I'm talking about connections between neurons. Each of the neurons can make a couple of connections or as many as 30,000 connections. Now, all of that depends mostly on those 5 elements, which are, we call nutrition, exercise, but nutrition. Because you're taking something in that gives the energy, that gives the inflammation or lack thereof, oxidation or lack thereof, glucose dysregulation or lack thereof, and lipid destruction or lack thereof with each and every meal. Each and every meal is that essential. It can be either productive and creation of new pathways and processes, or destructive. That's how important food is to the brain, that requires constant attention. It's a needy little organ, isn't it?
Yeah. How did you uncover this though? That food could potentially affect the brain? Because obviously you didn't always think that way. What were the first moments that you were like, hey, there's a connection there?
My goodness. We've always known that food affects the body, right? We had information about food affecting the heart and the vasculature, our blood vessels. And people think that brain is, something that is in a box that is different from our heart, from the rest of our body. It's really not. It has the same blood vessels, the same kind of structure, albeit it is a more advanced version of any other organ we have, and a very, like Dean said, a needy one too. So whatever affects our heart and our vasculature affects our brain too.
Exponentially more so.
Exactly. And we've had information for years. People sometimes say that nutrition is complicated. It really isn't. We've had so much information telling us that when people eat better, they have less Alzheimer's, they have less stroke, they actually have their cognitive capacity well into their 80s, 90s and beyond, and they live longer and happier. I'm so happy that we have the technology now to actually look at how food affects brain cells and brain structure. And it's just really exciting to see that these effects are not only immediate. Yes, they are immediate as well, but long-term as well.
But the studies came to us immediately as soon as we worked with Elizabeth Barrett Connor and her population. And we saw that people who ate a certain type of food, at the time, they just said more plants, but not more specific. And then when we came to Adventist Health Study in Loma Linda, which is 100,000 people, 96,000 people over 50 years, repeatedly we saw that people who are more plant-based, vegan, healthy vegan, they actually lived up to 12 years longer. Right. I mean, we're talking about 12 years longer and healthier. And of course, people who want to make the argument say, oh, but there are other factors. No. This is a large enough study to be able to delineate what part of it is lifestyle. I mean, is there walking, what part of it is there stress, and what part is food. And food kept coming as the dominant issue. Right. When we did reviews on others, we've published multiple reviews. Again, it was the plant-based diet. So it kind of, and then we looked at the California teacher study, the largest study out there. And Ayesha was one of the large, when she did a fellowship at Columbia University in stroke. And while there, she did research in the California teacher study, 133,000 people over 20 years or more. She won the youngest researcher award for that. And what they found was that they kind of asked her to do work on Mediterranean diet. Okay, Mediterranean, what is Mediterranean diet? And what she found was just remarkable.
Yeah, the scoring system of the Mediterranean diet is such that you kind of get a higher score if you eat fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes. And you get a low score when you eat meat, chicken, dairy products. So that essentially looks like a plant-based diet, doesn't it? The only little, pivot point is omega-3 fatty acids. And we know that we can actually get a cleaner version of that if we skip the middleman, the fish, and just go to algae. So, and that study was incredible because it showed that for every step of change towards an optimal diet, which is essentially a plant-based diet, people reduce their risk of stroke. And so it's not an all or none phenomenon. The more you go towards a plant-based diet, the better you are, and the lower your stroke risk is.
And every study that came out, the MIND diet, the Mediterranean diet, others, 53% reduction in Alzheimer's
with MIND diet.
MIND diet. And what was the main component of MIND diet that was effective? The plants, over and over again. In our own clinic, we had one of the largest clinics here on prevention and lifestyle. I saw 3,000 people in Loma Linda proper, which is 1/3 of this population is Seventh-day Adventists or plant-based, right? 1/3. So you expect of the 3,000 dementia patients, because their closest next clinic is 2 hours away, to at least 1/3 of them to be vegetarians or vegans, right? It had to be. In fact, it should have been higher because the population of Seventh-day Adventists, which are mostly plant-based, would be more aware of this clinic because they're higher educated, and also they want to come to their own clinic hospital more. So there would be an oversample. So of the 3,000, at least 1,000 had to be Seventh-day Adventist, vegetarian, vegan. Of the 3,000, guess what number was vegetarian, vegan?
Of the population of Alzheimer's.
19.
Oh,
Yeah.
19. Not 19%.
Only 19 people.
Individuals. Less than 1%. So repeatedly, whether it was our own large study, whether it was other studies, it was the plant-based component that was not only protective, it was massively protective against brain diseases. So then when we went to Cedars, and then from Cedars, we actually partnered with Beach Cities Health District, which is the largest, now we lead the largest brain health research initiative, community-based brain health in the country around a mostly plant-based diet. Our goal is plant-based and kind of help people to move in that direction, but it's the largest study in the country.
You brought up so much I want to unpack, but I want to go something really basic now. Can you explain to us what stroke is, what Alzheimer's is, and what dementia is? Because
Sure.
are those the three brain diseases that you mostly work with?
Yes. I'm a stroke specialist, and we're both specialists in neurodegenerative diseases of the brain. So stroke is when there is a damage to the blood flow into the brain. There are two types of stroke, basically. There's one type where there's a clot that plugs the flow of blood to a particular part of the brain. And then there's a hemorrhagic stroke where the blood actually just bursts open and there's bleeding into the brain. The clots are usually formed because of damaged wall arteries. The same way that we have heart attacks, we actually have strokes in the brain. And then it bursts open sometimes because, again, multiple reasons, but the most common one is high blood pressure. High blood pressure causes hemorrhagic strokes most often. Dementia is an umbrella category. The definition of dementia is when people have memory problems to the point where they can't really take care of themselves or their activities of daily living. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. It is the most common type of dementia. 60 to 70% of all dementias are Alzheimer's disease. There are other types too, like vascular dementia because of small strokes, Parkinson's dementia, Lewy body dementia, as you may have heard. So there are multiple types, but usually the word dementia and Alzheimer's is used synonymously because Alzheimer's is such a major type of dementia.
I see. And how is it, what makes it different? It's plaques, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how does food affect it?
Yeah. So first of all, let me tell you how big these two categories are. The second most expensive and biggest disease in the country is heart disease at 120 billion. Alzheimer's by itself, direct cost 304 billion, indirect cost another 240 billion. 6 million people suffer from Alzheimer's, and it's the fastest growing epidemic beyond coronavirus. In the West, number one in UK, number one cause of mortality, morbidity in UK, number one in Japan, and it will be number one in US. That's how fast just Alzheimer's is moving. And then stroke, 700,000 people per year have strokes. Now, all of this, we say more than 90% can be avoided, can be prevented. And why? Because much of what's underlying this is vascular. We talked about blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes. We're talking about inflammation and the things that we talked about. What affects those things? By far, the most important chronic intervention is food. Food causes inflammation, or actually is anti-inflammatory effects. Food causes dysregulation of your glucose, be it through sugar or through fats, or it can actually heal that process. Food can cause oxidation, which is through fats and lipids, or can take away oxidation. This is why food and every meal we have is so profound. That's why in Loma Linda, which are the healthiest people in the world, and we see 90-year-olds walking around in the gym in Drayson Center and all that.
Pre-COVID era.
Pre-COVID. And then 5 miles away in San Bernardino, which is one of the unhealthiest places in the US, 5 miles away, you have people in which we just came from the free clinic, in their 40s that have strokes. Here we have 90-year-olds fully functional. Over there, 40-year-olds that have stroke. Why? What was the difference? Not geography. They're 5 miles apart. It had to do with food and access to food, mostly. Yeah. The difference in food, mostly. And if we just change the food content 20%, right, That's 20% savings from heart disease, stroke and dementia. Isn't that worth it? Why isn't there more conversation about changing food than anything else?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the 30-day Alzheimer's solution is a pretty bold statement, and it is the name of your book, right? That is coming out on March 23rd. We have to make sure that we say that a million times during this, because people are going to be, just scammering for buying the book. But I mean, Alzheimer's, it's a soul-crushing disease for many families. My grandfather died of it. My mom realized that she needed to put him somewhere safe when 2 Girl Scouts came to his door to sell him cookies, and he looked through the keyhole and went and got his gun and opened the door with his gun to 2 little adorable girls selling cookies. So many people listening to this it just might, we know it's not snake oil, but it may sound like that to people. It may come off like that because there's just millions of people suffering from it, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And nobody mentions changing their diet.
Right.
Can people really prevent this debilitating disease from even starting? And is there an age where it's too late to start prevention? Like the damage has been done, quote?
Yeah. First of all, the way we approach things differently, we say that there's no one food even. Blueberries are fantastic. We have this Neuro 9 in our book that said 9, but we are such anti-reductionist that we felt so uncomfortable even doing that. Even the 30-day concept is reductionist to us. But there are people coming out even in our plant-based world that say that they can reverse Alzheimer's and so on. So nobody can reverse Alzheimer's once it's fulminant, and it's playing with people's hopes, and that's dangerous. We were told many times that if we just hinted at that fact that we could reverse Alzheimer's, we would sell 2 million extra books. We're not interested in that. We are interested in science. But prevention is possible. Prevention is not only possible, it's been shown not just by us, but by many people already. And it takes simple measures, but comprehensive measures. And that's why it's important. The idea of 30 days, although we don't think that you can get to Shangri-La, or I don't even know where that is, but to Nirvana stage or anything in 30 days, you're not going to get that. But we were convinced by others that if you follow a 30-day process, because we're also providing, at least for people who pre-buy, that there will be a 1-month period where we'll take people through a process where they become familiar. You remember, public health is about access, right? Real estate is about location, location, location. Public health is about access, access, access. Access to information, access to resources, access to knowledge and coaching. So if somebody goes through these 30 days, not with bombastic statements or with little snake oil little things like here, avoid lectins and your life will be fixed and avoid that. No, it's about process of how to change habits. They're not going to change everything in 30 days, but they will be given enough tools that will become the nidus or the seed for something to be established. So that's the whole point of a 30-day journey of getting these little tools that they pick up. And by the way, at the core of what we do is we're both behavior neurologists, is behavior change, habit change. If habit change is about the gimmick of the day, the New Year resolution of the day, or the diet of the day, it always fails. If it's about creating smart goals, specific, measurable, attainable over a period of time, and getting the success, which then turns on that dopamine reward thing. And if you do enough of that, that changes habit. If you change enough habit, that changes culture character. And then if you change enough of that in the family, that changes culture. Okay. And our goal is a culture of brain healthy living in the communities where we want to make difference. Everything we do, every penny we make goes to our Healthy Minds Initiative, which is, its purpose is to raise awareness about lifestyle and its impact. Nothing more.
It's so important what you just said about culture. I get a lot of flack sometimes at Switch for Good because I think a lot of just the funders in the space feel that culture change is almost impossible. So we have to do it other ways, changing laws. But I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote when she says, in order to change the law, you have to change the culture first. So even getting the judges to say, oh, wait, this does make sense, and they have some sort of understanding of it from the culture. So it may be hard. We know it's hard, but it has to be done for big changes to make.
Absolutely.
And the next thing I'm about to say is not fulsome flat to you guys, but you guys and others who are actually promulgating, spreading the message. Culture change. Culture is when ideas around the concept become ubiquitous in a society so that the person turns left, right, forward, and back, they see it. When they see it enough, it resonates and creates enough dissonance in the mind where even bad ideas become evident to them. I mean, for centuries, we've had bad ideas. How we've subjugated populations, how we've subjugated women, how we've treated our children, how we've treated our animals. But good people have propagated bad ideas. Why? Enough signal wasn't there. Culture is when you, I, and 1,000 others get the message out there enough where it's ubiquitous and it creates enough signal where that brain then says, I have to think about it, which happened to us in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
I love I know that you're very interested in habit change from doing research on you. And as a health coach, it's all about habit change, not trendy diets. And I want to ask you, therefore, what are the foods which you recommend? Like, because a healthy diet, healthy vegan diet means a lot of different things to different people. And so tell us what those foods are or not, which ones to avoid. And also expand on your neuro program and what each letter from the word neuro stands for. But first, let's start with food, since that's the N in neuro is nutrition.
Yes. So as far as nutrition goes, and this is a very, very summarized version of an extensive list of research and data that we have, but if somebody comes in and has a conversation with me and wants to know what kind of food they need to eat, it's essentially plants, unprocessed plants. So mostly vegetables, whole grains, fruits, nuts and seeds, legumes as a source of amazing fiber and plant protein. And the things that they need to avoid are processed foods, sources of purified sugar or processed sugar, like sodas and things of that nature. And also sources of, basically saturated fats. Not all fats are bad. There was a time when we ourselves were completely anti-fat, but now we actually have evidence that people who consume mono and polyunsaturated fats in the form of nuts, seeds, extra virgin olive oil in small quantities, they actually do really, really well. And people who consume meat, cheeses, dairy products that are high in saturated fats, they don't do very well. As a matter of fact, when they have looked at dietary patterns like the Mind in the Mediterranean, we said that earlier, you're given a low score if you consume sources of saturated fat. So yeah, eating unprocessed plants and staying away from processed foods and sources of saturated fats, which are meat, cheese, and dairy.
What about the omega-3s? You mentioned that earlier, and that is a fat.
Right.
Yeah, so we just got done doing 2 reviews. We just submitted them. One was omega-3 and the developing brain, and omega-3 and the aging brain. We have 2 teenage kids. They were in Chef AJ recently themselves. They're very passionate about this concept, and they're the science kids, and they're working on this concept as well. Omega-3 is essential for the brain.
Right.
And be it ALA, EPA, DHA, especially DHA, it's essential for the brain. That's the only fat that's essential for the brain. There are some people out there that say the brain is made of fat, therefore we need fat. That's junk. That doesn't mean anything. The brain does not have stored fat. It has structural fat that it can make itself, or the liver can make it for it, and the body can make for it. But the DHA is definitely needed, and you can get that from food. It's a thoughtful plant-based diet, usually that's not a problem with just chia and flaxseed. And then at the same time, the other thing that people miss is, you increase the sources of omega-3, but also because there's a limiting process in the conversion from ALA, if you reduce the source of omega-6, that helps out significantly. If you reduce your alcohol or challenge to your liver, it will be helpful. So keep the liver optimal by lowering the things that damage it, lower the omega-6 foods, which is usually the processed foods and the meat and all that stuff, but raise omega-3. But even there, we think that there's enough data, and research is not absolutes, there's trends. And in our massive review for children and developing brains and pre-birth, we think that there might be need for supplementation. And so an algae-based omega-3 is helpful. For women, pregnant women, definitely we think so. CDC and others promote fish, but we're worried that fish, we only check mercury and lead. And what about the other thousands of chemicals we add that we never check? And fish are bioconcentrators. And then the aging brain, plastics, and the aging brain definitely is under challenge. So you might want to give it some help with omega-3 supplementation, but algae-based. And that's the latest review that was just in the last 2 days that we did.
Going to be published soon.
And that's it. That's basically it. As far as supplementation, under those circumstances only, and then other supplements, there have been very little evidence. B12, they keep bringing up B12. If you eat a fortified, good, food source, you shouldn't have problem with B12. But get your B12 checked, because it's more common than people think, not just in vegans, but across the board, 40-something% of general population B12 deficient. So if you're deficient, but your first step shouldn't be just supplementation. Why are you deficient? You shouldn't be deficient unless you're taking medicines that block the transformation from B12 into the body, unless you have some overgrowth or bacterial, processes because of your bad food. Change that. But then if all of that's been ruled out, then B12. The third thing that's been proven, and this came out of our research from Cedars-Sinai, was because when we looked at the retina, which is continuation of the brain, and with the special devices, when you gave people curcumin,
which is in turmeric,
and turmeric, it actually bound to the amyloid, which is the bad protein in Alzheimer's, and actually was removed. So curcumin, we say, take it in pill form if you want, but in food form, Ayesha adds it in everything. So sometimes I wake up in the morning with dusting all over me. So I curcumin. That's basically it.
I have a question about what the brain fires off of. What it uses as fuel? As I had always learned, it's glycogen, and I would experience multiple bonks in my athletic career. Right? When my muscle tissue was using up all the glycogen and taking it away from the brain, and then you go into that state where it's actually pretty dangerous. If you're riding a bike, it'd be better if you were maybe running or something, because it's a pretty wonky feeling. But I did some research to understand it. So am I on the right track? Is that true? Or does it also, work off of other macronutrients, or is it mostly glycogen that the brain fires off of?
Yeah, no, it is. So at its the most essential unit, the most essential preferred fuel for the brain is glucose. And there are times when we go into starvation modes, or when we're very sick, or when we're not having enough calories, that the brain has the capacity to use ketone bodies as fuel. And that has been the reason why there's been such misinformation and such disagreements out there as far as what is the best fuel source for the brain. For a healthy brain, for it to function, it's very, very nitpicky. It kind of just needs a 3-course dinner. It needs the glucose to be presented to in a very neat fashion. So it needs that constant source. And that's why it's really important for us to actually be able to consume foods that doesn't really rush the glucose into our blood circulation right away, that it's actually slowly and gradually released in almost a timed version so that the brain continues to work. And sometimes when we're either not consuming glucose enough, or when we're actually consuming too much of it, the body goes into a frenzy, the brain goes into a frenzy, and our insulin receptors, which are essentially doorways for allowing glucose to come inside the cell for it to be used, they just shut off. They don't work properly. So you have a lot of glucose in your circulation, but not enough going into the cells. And that's what damages the kidney, the liver, and the concept of insulin resistance develops. There's more to it, but I'm really, really shrinking it down for this conversation's sake. And as far as ketone bodies,
the issue with the low carbohydrate diet. People are always saying, I just started feeling kind of tired. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I sometimes even wonder when I hear some people fight over ketone bodies, I'm like, maybe they actually need some glucose. That's why they're so upset.
Yes.
But it really causes a lot of so let's kind of step back. The concept of ketone bodies actually came about many, many years ago, decades ago, when there was a specific group of children with epilepsy or seizure disorders who were intractable, which means that none of the medication worked for them. So in order to shock the brain out of that state, doctors and scientists put them on a ketogenic diet. And that essentially starved them out. All of their glucose storage were depleted, and the brain started using ketone bodies, and their seizures went away. But I have to say that that's a very, 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 very small population of patients with a really serious disorder who actually benefited from them. And it was not meant to be long-term anyway, because they developed kidney stones and other disorders. Unfortunately, that concept kind of just seeped into the general population, and now everybody thinks that ketogenic diet is the panacea for all kinds of diseases. I'll stick to Alzheimer's disease. We don't have any good objective evidence that a ketogenic diet can prevent Alzheimer's disease or even reverse it. It has been done for a very short-term period, nothing more than 12 weeks, no research more than 12 weeks, in 12 weeks. And in a handful of patients, probably like 9 to 12 patients, that they showed that when people were put on a ketogenic diet, that their brain actually used that a little bit better. But as soon as it was stopped, well, first of all, they couldn't really stick to the ketogenic diet. As soon as it was stopped, the progression of the disease continued, and it actually even worsened. And we know that when people eat a high-fat diet, especially if the fat is saturated fat, it causes inflammation, oxidation, damage to the blood vessels, damage to the structure of the neuron. So ketogenic diet is a really, really bad idea for the brain.
For optimal brain function, can you go deeper after your nutrition recommendation you have for more that make up the acronym NEURO? Can you go into those?
Yeah. So exercise, E for exercise. Exercise is important. As we always say, have you noticed that nobody ever disputes exercise? Because it's young, I say that this whole battle is young men, Joe Rogan's men, who are trying to fight the confirmation bias of making bacon into medicine. It's not medicine. It's not going to work. And this battle is a losing battle. But on exercise, there's no argument. Exercise is extremely important for the body, but it's even more so for the brain. We say that nutrition, stress management, we'll talk about that, and sleep are extremely essential to flip the game, especially as we get older, from one of decay and aging to one of vibrancy and growth. So it creates the environment for growth. Exercise and mental activity, the O in neuro, optimizing, actually creates the growth. When you exercise, study after study shows that parts of the brain actually start growing. Hippocampus, the area associated with short-term memory, actually grows. The frontal lobe actually grows.
Even when we're older.
Even when
at any age.
At any age. What's amazing about that is that the standard American life, or standard Western life, or standard life for that matter, the brain starts decaying and atrophying starting in your 20s. Mm-hmm. But when people started exercising, they grew the brain. So completely flipped the script. That's the beauty of this. Why? So exercise increases blood flow. Exercise increases growth of promotion of this hormone called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is basically a growth hormone for the neuronal connections. Exercise manages stress better than anything else. Study after study shows that the best anxiolytic drug, anxiety drug out there, 3 times more beneficial than any drug, is exercise. Best antidepressant is exercise. So we're talking about hormones, we're talking about neurotransmitters, we're talking about blood flow, we're talking about emotions. At every level, exercise is your best tool. And a Harvard study showed that a brisk walk, 25-minute brisk walk a day for a period of time, reduced your chance of Alzheimer's, not in general population, and patients who were at risk, where we called MCI, mild cognitive impairment patients, pre-dementia. It reduced your risk of dementia by 45%.
Big.
Why is there nobody arguing about, why is there nobody talking about that? Because there's no money to be made. There's no blue jellyfish pill to be sold at midnight. If I get, I say, if I was Secretary of Health and Human Services, if anybody out there wants to make me, I'll be fired the next day, because I would connect every television to a foot pedal exerciser.
Yeah.
So that it's not working unless they're moving it. They don't have to move it fast, just moving it. Just that act of movement will reduce dementia, stroke, diabetes, high blood pressure exponentially. So exercise is critical. Now, 3 types of exercise from our studies. One is aerobic, no question. We use the term 150 minutes a week, but reality is you can move that up as much as possible better. There is an upper limit, but I can guarantee you many people in our audience is not hitting that upper limit. So aerobic exercise. What type? The type that you will do.
It's always.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever you like.
Yes. If it's dancing, do dancing. We just got this Oculus head thing that you can do box. I love it for now, at least. And do that. Yeah. If it's foot pedal, I actually like the idea of a foot pedal exerciser in front of the couch, because then the rule I put to my patient is actually I write a prescription. You can't watch the TV unless you're moving this.
Yeah.
That's
great.
Yes.
Like fuzzes out if you're going to start to
Yes,
stop.
exactly. The second thing is strengthening exercises are important for many reasons: stabilizing, lowering pain. Ironically, shoulder pains, joint pains are actually reduced with strengthening exercises. But of all the strengthening exercises, leg strength is the dominant one. Why? Your legs and your glute muscles are your biggest muscles. So the number one source of metabolism and stabilization of metabolism. Your biggest pump in your body is not your heart, it's your legs. What pumps the blood from your lower extremity are the leg muscles. Leg strength has been repeatedly associated with bigger brains. So we say, I definitely don't like weight-bearing squats, but do mini squats, do lunges, do stairs, that kind of stuff, or tension bikes, whatever it is. And then thirdly, move throughout the day. And for that, it's change your environment. So your living space should be one where you're standing more often, you're moving more often. We even eat around the counter in the kitchen, standing up. So move throughout the day. If you're sitting around for 3-4 hours at a time, it's not good. You negate the benefit of exercise. So those 3 things are extremely important for exercise.
And then, by the way, Dotsy's got the most brain cells of all of us, because when she was training for the
Big
Olympics,
brain.
she worked her glutes and her legs so hard.
Absolutely.
The studies on leg strength, especially the people like yourselves, their brains are bigger.
That is amazing. I did not know that. I don't have any excuses then for, the blondness.
Tell us about the unwinding, the restorative, and the optimization.
Right. So unwind essentially is stress management, but it's not about bad stress, only getting rid of stress. People think that they just have to lay down on a hammock and life is all good. No, it's actually building good stress. It's taking that, language class, or learning a new language, or learning a new musical instrument, or taking on a project. Something that is connected to one's purpose, something that one gets drawn towards. That is the biggest factor. And Dean will talk about that, because it's connected to optimize, the O of neuro, of what that essentially means. R stands for restorative sleep, and not just the kind of sleep where you take a pill and you go to sleep, but the kind that allows you to go through the deeper stages of sleep. Because sleep, we could talk about sleep for hours. It is the most important time of the day, even though we're completely knocked out and we're asleep, because 2 things happen. The brain cleanses itself. We have this janitorial mechanism in our brain called the glymphatic system that gets activated when we hit those deeper stages of sleep. And they essentially go and they collect all the debris and they repair the brain for the next day's work. And the second thing that happens is our memories get consolidated when we're sleeping. So all of the small little information, the working memory that keeps getting collected, they actually get placed in the right file folder cabinet, per se, in the brain. And so we can recall this information better when we sleep. And there's been some research done that people who have even 1 night of bad sleep, I don't want to scare anyone, but even 1 night of bad sleep increases the level of the bad protein, amyloid beta, that is associated with Alzheimer's disease in the cerebrospinal fluid. And people don't do very well as far as their examination or test scores are concerned if they haven't slept. So it's really, really important to get a deep restorative sleep without the help of medication initially. But there's nothing wrong with medication if people actually want to improve their sleep hygiene.
We have a whole program around that, sleep hygiene and cognitive behavioral therapy. Sleep hygiene is, we can talk, like Ayesha said, for quite a long time about that, but people invest in all kinds of spas and so on and so forth. We say, make your bedroom your ultimate spa. because that investment in that 8 hours is so critical. It's what determines the long-term health. In fact, one study showed that people who have sleep apnea or other sleep disorders that have been untreated for a long period, their chance of Alzheimer's goes up by as much as 70%.
When sleep apnea is corrected with a CPAP machine, the risk of Alzheimer's disease goes down significantly, almost equal to that of the general population. It's the untreated sleep apnea that actually causes a lot of trouble.
Okay.
Optimize is the good stress. The brain, there's a reason we have this brain. I mean, think about it. In order to function, if those were the two only functions, which was running away from other animals, the gazelles did it well already. So why did we need humans, right? Yeah. The cheetahs did it fine. So we can run away. And if it was about reproduction, well, those fruit flies are doing it just fine, and the viruses and the bacteria. So it's not about that. It's about capturing data. This brain is there to capture data. To do those two things, but as it happens, it does other things as well. It wants data. In fact, it's more hungry for data than it is for glucose and oxygen. As I'm exaggerating, but it sounds more sexy that way. So information. And when you're not giving it information, especially as you're growing older, it sees an inefficiency of energy utilization. It actually withdraws. It shrinks. It pulls back its connections. So it becomes one of the most important things as far as protection is connectivity, challenging the brain. So we did a meta-analysis, which is even a more painful review. It's not that painful, but it's painful. Let's be honest. It's painful. It was published in 2018. And what we found in that, at the general crux, was purpose, complexity, challenge. Purpose means that if that stress is driven by something you want to do, then it's going to pull you along. I hate the word motivation because it's not a mathematical term. It's not, what is that? I mean, am I supposed to just wake up, just jumping out of bed with my arms up like this? That doesn't happen any mornings until I have my coffee. But so what does that mean? It means challenging the brain around something you want to do. It doesn't have to be saving the rainforest. That would be fantastic. It doesn't have to be saving all the animals. That would be but it could be something like, I want to learn a musical instrument. I want to learn how to paint. I want to take some classes that I never was able to do. I want to lead this group. I want to start a podcast and change the world, so that kind of stuff. That's purpose. Complexity means real life activities. I mean, as much as I put down Sudoku and crossword puzzles, those are great, but they're not complex real life activities. When you're learning a musical instrument, it involves all of your brain, not just one part more dominant, or if you're learning a language, or if you're leading a group. So that's why it's critical to have all of that, the complex. And then challenge means push yourself to the next level. If you could do a song, I always bring guitar because Ayesha is a singer too, on top of everything else. She's a cook, culinary singer. I have no talent. So I've been trying to play guitar for 30 years, terribly. But if you're learning a song with 4 chords, well, great. After a while, you can only listen to Let It Be so many times until the family kicks you out. Yeah. And then push to the next level, and then to the next level. That push creates the connections. Yeah. Those connections don't happen by themselves. It happens when you push yourself to the next level of learning. Yeah. Lifelong learning is the most effective thing. A couple of studies, the London taxi driver study showed this, where at any age, when they went through the learning process of how to get the taxi license, they grew their brain. And their
that was before GPS, because they had to learn all the city streets in London, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in first year of college, I drove for Domino's, and I can't tell you how many people got free pizzas because that was the idea back then. You didn't get there in 30 minutes. And then the second study was the nun study, which these group of nuns dedicated their body, their blood, their diaries. And what came out of that was the most protective thing was complexity of language, complexity of vocabulary, complexity of thinking. What do we call it? Idea density.
Yeah, idea density.
Lovely concept. We said that if we ever start a band, it's going to be called idea density.
I love that term.
Yeah, but idea density matters, which means people who make themselves uncomfortable, push themselves, think. That creates the connectivity and protects you. Now you add nutrition, mind study, not even an optimal diet, but mostly plant-centered, reduce your chance of Alzheimer's by 53%. You add the brisk walk, reduce your chance of Alzheimer's by 45%. Stress management, which we didn't talk about, which is a whole different thing. You add sleep, you add mental activity, and when we say 90% protection against for stroke, dementia, and Alzheimer's, we're not off. That's exactly what happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that include if your mother and father both have it, if it's in the family, you can prevent it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. The genes. Let's just talk about Alzheimer's disease. The genes that have been identified for Alzheimer's disease, only about 3% of Alzheimer's patients who have a particular type of gene are very heavily driven by it. There are 3 genes: presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and amyloid precursor protein. If you have these genes, then your chances of having Alzheimer's disease is almost 100%, and you will get it. It's just a matter of time, and usually people get it at a very early age, right? But then the rest of it is essentially a mixture of different genes. It's a polygenic model. And these genes are not Alzheimer's genes. These genes are genes for, say, for example, lipid metabolism, glucose metabolism, getting rid of waste products, making sure that the brain gets enough blood supply, making sure that the cell membranes actually fix themselves properly. And all of that is affected by lifestyle, by what we eat, how we move, how we sleep, who we interact with, and what kind of lifestyle we choose.
So 3% of Alzheimer's is driven by the kind of genes that are 100% guaranteed you'll get the gene. The other 97%, so when we said 90%, it's actually an underestimate. The other 97% are polygenic. The second highest genetic risk is ApoE4. If you have one of those genes from one parent, your risk goes up 4 times. If you have 2, one from each parent, your risk goes up 12 times. So does that mean that if you have 2 genes, by the way, only 2% of the population have both genes, you'll get the disease? No, 50% never develop the disease. Why? Lifestyle. So what is it about ApoE4, that next highest risk gene? You know what the function of ApoE4 is? Lipid transport, fat transport. So it does a bad job. So, you know, the old joke, I'm old enough to say, you know, it said, Doc, it hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that. Doc, I have a risk for Alzheimer's with lipids. So don't eat lipids. Where do you get fat? Where do you get saturated fat? From animal-based products, from processed foods like that have trans fats and saturated fat.
Dairy products.
Dairy products. You remove those out of your diet, your risk goes to nothing. Simply nothing. The genetics have, in the last 10 years, with these amazing new tools, we know the genes for Alzheimer's. They've completely opened up the picture. It's lifestyle. And what about lifestyle? Processed food and saturated fats from meat, dairy, and cheese and others.
I love this idea of creating good stress for stress management. When we were making the Game Changers film, I got to spend some time with Dean Ornish, and he was, like you guys, really obviously the food, but also really pushing developing rich relationships and good sleep, but stress mitigation was, high on the list of kind of, he has sort of 5 specific things too as well. That's like, all right, you have to make sure that you're bringing all of these in, not just the food. And he talked a lot about stress mitigation. So I love this idea of bringing good stress in to challenge you. Will bringing the good stress in help to mitigate the bad? Because obviously the bad stress is what's so hard for a lot of people. And, when you tell people to, reduce their stress, I mean, even when people tell me that, it's like, okay, great idea, but how? And then it's kind of also, you get fixated on it. It's all you think about. So you try to stress less, that consumes your focus, which makes you stressed more. How can we help people to mitigate their stress and unwind? Would it just be an infusion of good stress?
I'm kind of disturbed by a lot of the gurus out there that throw things, but not give you tools, right. Especially stress. I love what you just said there. Like sometimes focusing on stress causes stress.
Yeah.
I mean, not sometimes, always. Why am I not, like whenever I first started meditating, like, why am I not getting this? Why? That caused more tension. So the reason we fail things is because of lack of specificity, lack of good definitions and clarity. So one of the things we do in our house, all the dining room is not a dining room, it's a workroom. And all the walls are whiteboard paint. So the kids get up and write specific things. So we talk about specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. You can use other acronyms as well, but that's good enough for now. Define your bad stressors specifically and measurably. Measurably is important. I don't like my work is not specific or measurable. I don't like the morning commutes to my work. I don't like the morning report. I like the public speaking. So you see, by doing that, you actually take a thing and break it into good parts and bad parts. That gives you trajectory, that gives you goals, that gives you purpose. So even evolving, this is almost like a management tool. Evolving your job becomes meaningful and specific and measurable. So when we say SMART goals with stress, identify your stressors specifically, measurably, attainably. Can I truly change this? And relevant doesn't matter because it has to be a higher goal, and time bound. So here we go. I want to change my diet. Means nothing. Diet after diet. I want to reduce my cheese consumption by 50% in the next 3 months. That has specificity. First, I have to figure out how much cheese. This 30-day plan, which in the book and in the course that comes with it, if you sign up early, we go into how to give people these tools. Specifically, say what you're trying to change. First, you have to know how much you're truly consuming. We underestimate the bad things. We overestimate the good things. When you spend a little time truly reflecting, you realize, oh, no, I'm actually eating a lot more cheese than I thought, or sugar I thought. How much dairy? And then specifically, measurably, I'm consuming 20 slices of cheese. I'm going to reduce that by half over the next month. It's not even about the outcome. It's about habit. When you take on activities in that smart way, you create successes because it's achievable. You've done it. You've done something specific, not some amorphous thing that you don't get a good satisfaction for. And you check it off as having done. That creates the first pathway. You do the same thing with meat. You do the same thing with sugar. And after the third or fourth habit, you now have a habit highway. Now you have a system, not just a statement. So that's why the 1 month program is focused on more habit creation around behaviors that then will become a highway for future further development. There's no way that in 1 month is going to change an entire lifestyle. But what we're hoping to do is actually give you the management tools to create a pathway toward improvement for the rest of your life. And what we have found is when you take one little chunk of behavior with our kids, it is so empowering that especially if it's achievable, that when you get it done, it becomes a running theme after a while.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Specificity is like the power,
Yes.
Puts the power in momentum. Because you get really excited when you do one or two little things, and then you want to do one or two more, and one or two more, and one or two more, and then that momentum builds. Thank you so much for breaking that down.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah.
So for our audience, I have two things for them to do. One is to go get the 30-day Alzheimer's solution, and the other one is to listen to your podcast. Do you have a podcast?
Yeah.
We do. Our podcast is called The Brain Health and Beyond. And Dean and I created that because, well, we like to talk. And we like to talk around brain health. And we have so much information to share. Atsia and Alexandra, as physicians, this is our clinic. We're sitting here, we're seeing patients. I see patients in the ER, in the clinic, and it's just patient notes and doing our best that in that 1 hour, we give them all the tools that they need. But we think that a better way of dispersing this information, which is essentially public health, is through connecting to people where they are. And so we always wanted to do that. And that's why, we're standing in our pantry talking about beans and lentils, and we have a Facebook page, and we created this podcast to just kind of connect with people and disperse this information of empowerment and hope that they can really take care of their brain health, because we see the devastation. We see the devastation side here at the hospital, and people shouldn't wait until they get to this point that they can do a lot for themselves. And that's what the book is all about, the 30-day Alzheimer's solution. We've included so many recipes in there. And what we're really proud about is the 30-day program that we created. So for people who pre-order, they're going to be included in this 30-day program where Dean and I are going to be with them on a daily basis. We have guest speakers who come and will talk about behavior, sleep, about stress management. We'll have cooking sessions and so much more. So that we could actually just walk people through this journey together.
We have a Harvard-trained sleep doctor, Oxford-trained stress management doctor.
Yeah,
we have 2 coaches,
yes,
3 nutritionists, all for free. Because, like we said, just to get through this process and to kind of get familiar with the brain healthy living.
We highly recommend and encourage people to support their local bookstores first, if they can. That would be wonderful. But they can actually find the book anywhere. They can get all of that information from our website, which is Team Sherzai, teamsherzai.com.
Okay.
And we're on social media as well, so we'd be happy to connect with them. Whereas Sherzai MD, I had to think about that. Sherzai MD on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
Okay, all right. And then won't you guys come back and take us through this 30-day? Because I feel like that's obviously that's many hours, but that's another hour of a deep dive that we could share with our listeners and encourage them to, get the book and get cracking.
We would love that.
It's serious.
We would love that.
Would love for you guys to go through the 30-day, because at the beginning we do a brain test, and at the end of the 30-day we do a brain test.
Yeah.
So I would love the audience to go through that and see it for themselves, see the change.
Yeah, we would love for you guys to be there.
This has been really fabulous.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for everything you guys do.
Hey folks, okay, back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.